Welcome to Feminine Corner. Today on Feminine Corner, we're going to be talking about basic first aid techniques and how we should react when we encounter emergencies in our environment. Today, I have a certified basic first aider and practical first aider from the Nigerian Red Cross Society. Her name is Deborah Olaiya. Welcome to our studio, Deborah.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Let's kick off the conversation with what exactly is first aid and why should every woman learn it?
What we can call first aid. First aid is the first skilled assistance given to a casualty before sending them to the hospital. So we say skilled assistance because the person administering first aid has to be skilled in first aid. So they undergo certain training, they are tested and we are qualified that, okay, this person can provide this assistance. And a casualty is anybody that has whether been injured or required first aid before we send them to the hospital. And why every woman should know first aid is just the general why everybody should know first aid. One, it prevents further complications because there's a lot we can do before medical assistance gets to a casualty that can actually prevent whatever has happened from getting worse. And we also do it to preserve life and we do it to promote recovery.
What are the common emergencies that happens in homes?
I would say in our context, the most common emergencies would be bleeding, burns, and unconsciousness. Those are the most common that we have.
So when burning, bleeding, or unconsciousness happens in the home, what is the first thing a woman should do when that kind of emergency happens?
The first process in first aid just generally is to call for help. Except you are a trained medical professional, the things you need to help that person completely and wholly are not at home. So the first thing you need to do is to reach out for assistance so that it can be on its way while you try and do some measures to, prevent complications and things like that. So the first step is always to call for help. You can do that by calling emergency services, or you can do that by calling, you have a car, get the car running, while on our way to the hospital, that kind of thing.
Aside from the home, let's come to the public space. We have been in spaces where people had accidents on the road and people are just standing around, bringing out their phones, taking videos. In that kind of a place, even if the person is not a skilled, first aider, what should be the first line of action when we notice accident?
So if you are not a skilled first aider, the best thing you can do is to find someone either who is or reach out to the authorities, the police, the hospital, someone who can help that situation. Because you are not skilled, let's say you can do more harm than good. So if you are not skilled in first aid, it is usually better that maybe you stay on the scene and you call for help. That's the best thing you can do if you're not skilled in first aid.
So call for help. That means every Nigerian should have an emergency number on their phone, the number of hospitals close to them where they can get ambulances and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the issue we're having in Nigeria is that ambulances are not so popular, which it's a general thing in Nigeria. If you are going to wait for an ambulance, you may be on a long thing. What is best to do is transport the person, depending on how bad the accident is, to the nearest hospital. Because in the process of transporting a casualty, you could make things worse. Which is why I say just stay on the scene and call for help.
We have been saying about skilled first aid. What are the basic first aid skills everybody should have?
So basic first aid skills everyone should have would be, so we take it in terms of what is happening. You should be able to provide first aid to someone who is bleeding, someone who has had a burn, or someone who is unconscious. So because those are the most common ones, I would say those ones. And then also choking, because just in general, choking happens a lot more than, some other emergencies. So that choking as well, yeah.
Okay, so for burning, bleeding, and choking, those are the ones that people should learn.
Yes, and unconsciousness.
So for burning, what's the first thing a person should do?
So for burning, first aid, just in general, first thing to do is stay calm. For burns, you need to stay calm because you run the risk of panicking the casualty, and that's not good for anybody. So, step by step, stay calm, call for help, like I said before. Next thing you want to do is to lay the casualty down on a flat surface. The burnt area of the skin should not be in contact with the ground. So what you can do is that you can lay a towel on the ground and then lay the casualty on top of that towel. The next thing you want to do is to douse lukewarm or running water on the burn for 10 minutes. So it depends on the scale, how much of the body surface area has been burnt. So you can, if it's just the arm, you may not need to lay the casualty on the ground. But depending on the scale of the burn, if it's just an arm, you can put it under running water for that 10 minutes, like I said. But if it's somewhere on the body and you can't, maybe it's all over the body, it's quite extensive, you need to lay the casualty on the ground and pour lukewarm water all over the burnt surface area. Next thing you want to do is you want to remove any clothing on the skin that has been burnt as well. Now, take note, if that clothing is stuck to the skin as a result of the burn, just leave it there. Because you need, makeup professionals have a way to remove it, and removing it yourself may cause more bleeding and expose the casualty to infection. So just, if it's stuck to the body, just leave it there. But if not, you can remove it. Next thing you want to do, the burns that are exposed, there's no cloth, there's nothing over it. You can cover with a clean cloth or sterile gauze, depending on what not every household has a sterile gauze, except if there's a medical professional living in it. So a clean material is good enough. Just cover the person lightly, just cover, use the cloth to cover the body of the person, except for the face. Now, the face burns are treated differently. So just, if there are burns on the face, run them over water and get near hospital. Don't put anything over it or like that. Another thing to make sure of is to not overcool the casualty, because these casualties that have burns, you run the risk of extremes in temperatures. So they've come out of the burn and they are very hot. But then in the process of bringing them down from that heat, you may go too far and it may get too cold, and that's not good for the body either. Another thing is that because the skin barrier has been broken and it's been, that is gone, it's difficult for the body to regulate temperature. So it can go either too hot or too cold. So you want to make sure that you are not overcooling the casualty. So they begin to shiver, they begin to shake, just stop. Just stop with the water and the cooling. Yeah. Then you need to encourage the casualty to stay calm and to breathe, because a lot of the time with burns, they can hyperventilate, they can become very panicked. It's a very visual, gory experience. So you need to reassure them and to keep them calm. So that would be the process for dealing with burns first aid.
So what I'm hearing from you is, and also confirming what I've heard before, especially when the snake bite incident happened, a lot of the doctors online were talking about whenever this kind of things happen, you stay calm, be it bleeding, be it burning, be it snake bite. The first skill as a person that you need to get is calmness, and is how can you be calm in that kind of situation? But it's something that has to be learned anyways. Talk to me about bleeding.
Bleeding can be caused by several things. We have internal and external bleeding. So for internal bleeding, there's not much you as a person can do aside getting the person to the nearest hospital. But for bleeding is external, there are steps to follow. Now, you need to make sure you take note of some things. First thing you need to check is the bleeding a lot. Like how much blood are you seeing? If it's a large amount, you're going to take a different approach to it. And if there's also any foreign objects inside the casualty, so you need to watch out for those two things. How much blood is being lost, and whether there is a foreign object inside the casualty. So now, if there's a foreign object inside the casualty, you need to not remove it. And I cannot stress this enough. Do not remove the object. Reason being, you are going to cause more bleeding. So what you do is you leave it in there, you immobilize it. So depending on what kind of foreign object it is, you get a long material, make sure it's clean. Wrap it around the object that is in the casualty, and then around the casualty. So if it's at the torso, wrap it first around the object and around the stomach or the chest or wherever, and then tight firmly. Not too tight, but firmly, so that you're also trying to prevent any leakages from any blood from leaking from the site where that object is. So you're also providing some form of hemostasis while also immobilizing that foreign object. Now, if the foreign object is no longer there and the blood is a lot, your main focus and your main priority is to stop the bleeding. Blood has been lost, but our priority is to not let any more blood be lost. So get as many clean materials, clean cloths as you can, pad it on the bleeding side, put a lot of pressure on it, and then wrap it around and tie it. So you need to keep pressure on that area for as long as before you get to medical treatment. Now, say the fabric, the material you use to keep pressure on the wound gets soaked and then it's bleeding out. Do not remove the fabric that is already used to keep pressure. Just add on to it and then tie it again. Don't remove it because it's still providing some form of pressure, even though it's soaked. Don't remove it, just add on to it and add on to it and add on to it until you can get medical assistance. But for smaller cuts, smaller abrasions, things like that, you just need to clean the site where the bleeding has, the wound is. Make sure there's no dirt so that infection doesn't occur. And then leave it be. If it's not bleeding a lot, if it is bleeding a lot, you can cover it with some material. But other than that, it will heal on its own.
I know that a lot of the reasons why people don't engage in first aid treatment is because they are scared of, administering the technique. So how do one hone their confidence when it comes to first aid treatment?
The thing is, as a first aider, I will not, if you are not confident in your skill to administer that first aid, the best thing for you to do is to leave it. But if you are confident and you are just anxious, I think you need to remember that this is a human being. And if you value in that instance, however anxious the person trying to help you is, you would still want that help. So if you just need to remember that this is my fellow human being and I should do something if I have the ability.
So when can we get first aid wrongly?
In many ways. There are a lot of home remedies for things like burn or for itchiness, several different first aid emergencies that we as Nigerians have accepted and we have said this is the norm. So a lot of them cause more harm than good. To talk about them now is more exhaustive. But what I will say is that if you don't know how to do that first aid procedure well, just don't bother, because you could eventually end up doing more harm than good. So a very common time that people get first aid wrong is on accident scenes. Like if you're right, they'll say call for help and stay on the scene. So if there's an accident and then maybe there's a neck fracture, those are one of the more difficult ones to manage in first aid. So if you're not particularly skilled, you may end up doing a lot of damage. So in neck fracture, moving the casualty from point A to point B it can be a life-saving measure, because doing it wrongly can result in death, honestly. So if you move the neck every which way, it could cause a break, blood vessels could rupture, and that could be it. Fractures in general, they get mishandled a lot more commonly because bones are internal. So except you're seeing it and what exactly is going on in his body, you may not think anything is really going on. A lot is going on.
Yeah.
So, especially with fractures, I see that the stage with fractures, they get wrong a lot. So, if a fracture happens and you're not sure how to go about, please leave it alone and just get them call for help. Yeah.
And just like we're having this conversation, it is becoming, it's not a worry, but it's something I'm thinking about, that every school from primary, nursery school should have a first aider, a teacher that is a first aider to teach students practically, because when we are talking theoretically, it seems like vague, and a lot of people might not be having a mental picture of what we are saying.
Honestly, it's really crazy.
Yeah.
I see it a lot. I've been to communities, to schools where there is, forget a first aider, like their first aid box is lacking in great. It's really terrible. There's no first aider, and the first aid they have is barely first aid. What we encourage, the Nigerian Red Cross Society establishes clubs in schools to teach kids about first aid, so that if there's no teacher around there, the kids can administer the first aid. They are learning, they are becoming leaders, and they can help their community. They can go home, and that is how we spread the news of first aid around. So if your facility, even in workplaces, in schools, schools are a big part, but if your facility cannot afford a medical professional on ground full time, a first aider should be around, or you can invite institutions like the Red Cross Society to teach your members, to teach the kids about first aid. It's going to go such a long way.
Yeah, and I think because we're in a very spiritual society, it's like, oh, things would not happen. So for first aid boxes, I mean, a lot of us grew up with first aid boxes, but it's just like, oh, it's just another tool in the environment. What are the essential things that we need to find in a first aid kit?
So in a first aid kit, we don't use cotton wool so much anymore. We use gauze because we use either to, like I said when I was talking about burn, we use it to pad bleeding sites, we use it to cover up for burns, and if you use cotton wool, the particles can get in and they are very difficult to remove, so we just go with gauze now. So gauze for bleeding, for burns, things like that. You also want antiseptic solution, MCT, Dettol, that kind of thing, to wash off, if you have there's a bleeding and there's a bit of dust or dirt, you kind of want to put that on before you cover it up in gauze or whatever. You need plaster also to, you put on the gauze, you want to keep it firmly in place, that as well. You need a bandage to be able to wrap the gauze tightly. Like I was saying, if you have a foreign object in the body, I need something to tie it with. Or there's bleeding, I need to keep pressure. What the bandage is helping to do is to tie it firmly, and then if you use bandage properly, honestly, there won't be much bleeding. You need scissors to cut the bandage, things like that. Things you should not find in the first aid box. Honestly, there's no reason why I should be saying paracetamol inside the first aid box. If you need medication, go to the pharmacy.
Yeah.
That should not be found in the first aid box. Other things, we have what we call a triangular bandage, and we use that for two things. You can use the triangular bandage, one, to pad bleeding site. You can also use it to handle fractures. So there's a way in which we immobilize fractures using a triangular bandage, but that's a whole practical session on that. But yeah, that should also be in your first aid box. The most important thing about the first aid box is that somebody knows how to use it.
That's why I think first aid should be a course in every school, from nursery to primary. It should be a subject in every school, and it shouldn't be treated as a side course. It is really important because
it's so important.
Yeah, accidents happen every day, and it's very sad to have humans on ground, but they are ignorant or they are lacking in knowledge of what to do exactly. It doesn't make sense.
It's terrible.
Let's wrap up slowly. What are the emergency numbers women should save on their phones?
City, it varies per institution, it varies per, honestly, it varies a lot. But the national number for emergency, police, fire, hospitals is 112.
Yeah.
In Lagos, they have 767, but 112 is the national one. Now, for depending on the emergency you have, like now, while I was in university, the University of Ibadan has a fire station, and they have their own number. So if you are in a certain environment and you know there's a fire over there, they likely have a number. You can go over and you can go and collect it. Humanitarian services like the Nigerian Red Cross Society, they have branches in every state of the country. You can get their number in the branch of your state where you are. And if there's any issue, you can obviously call them. The hospitals, I think there are emergency numbers depending on the hospital. There are emergency numbers, of course, for the police, for fire, for road accidents like that. So they vary state by state, institution by institution like that. But 112 is the universal one for Nigeria.
Okay, so for Kaduna State, we have Kaduna State Emergency Management Agency, that is KATSEMA. So it is okay for everybody listening to Google that agency. They have a number on their website, and just save it up on your phone when you encounter any form of emergencies here in Kaduna State. And then, like Deborah said, 112 is national. So 112, my biggest prayer is that it starts becoming more accessible, because I know I tried it 3 years ago and they were saying that my network providers, blah, blah, blah. But then I tried it last week when it was, that is the 11th of February 2026, when they were celebrating 112 Day. That's the emergency number. And it went, and it did go. They were about connecting me to an agent, but I disconnected it immediately because I didn't have any emergency. I just wanted to, since we are celebrating 112, let's know whether it's going. So we have this notion in Nigeria that if since the fire service is not coming, since we have tried calling the ambulance before, it's not coming, that means it will never happen. Let's try and call. Do you understand what I mean? Like, let's try and just have it saved up and call it, because what if that day is a lucky day? What if they have stepped up on their services? So finally, if there is one emergency skill everyone must know, what would it be?
I would say management of bleeding or choking. Is it in first aid we have a hierarchy of things we want to attend to? So let's say we have a casualty and there are a lot of injuries, and we need to prioritize what to handle first. You go breathing, burns like that, broken bones that are going down. So breathing is the most important. If you can't get air to oxygen into the bloodstream, there's no point in administering any other kind of first aid. So, I was saying unconsciousness is one of the more common first aid problems. So unconsciousness has like it's a whole thing, because there are several causes. So we address each cause. We provide first aid depending on the cause. But a big cause can be choking, like I said. So I would recommend that everyone learn the Heimlich maneuver. So it's a procedure, a process that you use to get anything that's stuck in your esophagus out. Because that could stop you from breathing. So it varies depending on the age of the person that you are administering it to. A child versus an infant versus a grown adult, it varies. So I would say that everybody should go and learn the Heimlich maneuver.
Go on YouTube. YouTube has a video, a lot of videos on it. Thank you so much, Deborah Olaiya. I've been speaking to Deborah Olaiya, who is a certified basic first aider and practical first aider from the Nigerian Red Cross Society. Thank you very much, Deborah.